Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to the next episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight. It's time for another Tuesday Takes with Tre'Shon. He's Tre'Shon Diaz at Trey3Sean. We had a couple week hiatus here because this is your busy season outside of football, but got you back on just as rookie minicamp's wrapping up, and today's topic obviously talking about what we can expect from the Falcons rookies, just getting some takes off because we haven't really heard from you since the conclusion of the NFL draft. So I know you've got a lot of strong takes about the Shrine Bowl guys and other guys, so we'll get to all that today. But before we get started, Tre'Shon, how we doing?
Doing good, working hard so we can feed the family. This is the busy time of year, but we've always got time to talk Atlanta Falcons football. And we're kind of getting to the edge of having enough to talk about, but we still got some takes that we can fire off here before we get into the summer, and I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a good time to sort of transition into more of the meta conversation because the initial shock and the excitement hasn't really waned. Falcons fans are definitely back in, which I appreciate as a Falcons fan and just a person who needs Falcons fans to click on videos from time to time. But I think the excitement is legitimate. It's a great draft class, an exciting class, an aggressive class, and the UDFA class is the best that we've seen from this team in many years. So almost as excited to talk about those guys as the drafted players, but we're going to get into all that, guys. We're going to, talk, breadcrumbs, obviously, from rookie minicamp. Not going to learn too much from that first practice, but get Tre'Shon's take on some of his favorite guys and just sort of our expectations for the UDFAs, but also the rookies and their impact this year and what you can expect, a reasonable expectation. Or maybe unreasonable. I don't know. I don't want to put words in Tre'Shon's mouth. Maybe he's got, crazy expectations. But we'll get into all that stuff today as we kind of transition more into summer coverage here on Dirty Birds and Brews. But before we get started, I want to bring you guys a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline, folks. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action this summer. Baseball season, of course, is in full swing. We're heading into the latter stages of the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has got more ways than ever to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played, with the largest selection of odds on everything from the MLB, NBA, NHL, UFC. They've got esports on there if you're a League of Legends degen or anything like that. They got all that stuff for you. BetOnline is the best spot for all your sports wagering information and in-between games. You can head on over to the BetOnline Casino, where they've got all the top Vegas-style games, including live poker, live slots, all that stuff. If that's your speed, when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code. It's BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions on betonline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. So, Tre'Shon, I don't know if you had any more takes about the actual drafted rookies. I know we had you on day 3 and got your takes, but we've seen the whole class. We've seen Jack Nelson in the 7th. Obviously, Billy Bowman, I know, was a guy that you were excited about, and someone we talked about, funny enough, I think on one of our final shows too. I wonder if the Falcons were watching, but yeah, I mean, I just, when I look back at this class and thankfully, no drama with the rookies signing contracts. That we avoided that landmine. But yeah, any just thoughts on the class as a whole, or what anything changed for you after a couple weeks to sit on it?
Yeah, I think after sitting on it for a little bit, I think the main conclusion I've come to is that after the 2 first-round edge rushers, I think that Billy Bowman is kind of going to be the X factor for this Falcons defense in terms of the impact that he will be able to make in the secondary. So Xavier Watts is a great addition, and this isn't to slight Xavier Watts. He's going to be coming in and filling in for Justin Simmons, who, in my opinion, I think performed like an average safety last year. We didn't really get the kind of top 10 play that we were hoping that we would get with Simmons. But at the end of the day, he performed like an average guy. And so with Xavier Watts coming in, I'm kind of expecting him to perform as an average starting caliber safety. And I consider that to be a pretty respectable bar for a rookie because, again, he's a rookie. It's going to be his first year. If you tell me a guy we drafted in round 3 comes in and gives you average league play, that's a hit. like just to kind of get things rolling. Obviously, we want to see him break into those top 10 conversations and get better as the years go on. But when we're just looking for that baseline, I'm expecting average level play. So I think we're going to be able to replace Simmons well. What Billy Bowman, to me, has the opportunity to do is to supplant D. Alford and then raise the level of play. We were all pretty disappointed with what we saw from the nickel back position last year. And when it didn't work with Alford, we saw really quickly that the team didn't really have any other plans for the nickel cornerback position. Natron Brooks was the plan. Brooks outsnapped Clark Phillips in the slot by like 30-something snaps. And Clark Phillips had, I think, 2 snaps like the entire year in the nickel cornerback position. So they said they want to play Clark there more this year. We'll kind of see if that's true or not. But one thing we know for a fact is that Jeff Ulbrich is eyeing Bowman to take over that spot. And if he can give us league average play at the nickel spot, which I don't think we had last year, I think that's going to be huge for this unit. I think that's going to be really big for the secondary, which gave up the second most passing touchdowns in the league last year. I think he's an enforcer who, yeah, he has the occasional like errors in his tackling game, but it's mostly rooted in aggression, not a, unwillingness to hit. And I think being able to understand the difference between those two is important when looking at why is he missing tackles. So to me, Billy Bowman has a chance to really kind of take this Falcons defense to the next level. He can raise a position, and I expect him to do so when he comes in and plays. And that's really, I think, probably, looking back at the draft class now after a couple of weeks, the take that I'm kind of walking away with is that he, after those 2 pass rushers, has the opportunity to be the most impactful guy that they drafted.
Yeah, and I think part of that, like, I agree, I feel like kind of I'm setting people up, like, with my hype for Xavier Watts of like, if he just comes in and is a starter immediately and is like a good starter, then like that's better than like 80 to 90% of rookies. So it's like, that would be great. And I think some people would still be disappointed because of how much I've hyped him up. But, that's just the baseline. The idea is that he's going to continue to improve from there. But, that's kind of, and people forget like Brian Branch kind of had that sort of start too. And by the end of the season, obviously, his rookie season, he was talked about a lot more as this like, oh yeah, this guy's a steal, this. And I think we could see something similar with Watts. But I think with Bowman, it's sort of like, you mentioned it, like going from Simmons to Watts is not as big of like a difference. Like I think obviously Watts has the upside that Simmons just didn't have at this point in his career. Agreed. And the athleticism and stuff like that. But the gap, Simmons was fine. He wasn't exciting, which is kind of disappointing because I think we were hoping that they would have this really great safety tandem. And it was just a good safety tandem at the end of the day. But you look at what happened with D. Alford, and, this just goes back to the whole thing with Jimmy Lake, where it's like you're going to put all your eggs in the D. Alford basket, who's been very good as a man coverage slot corner. And then you basically asked him to play like 80% zone and also just put him in some really challenging positions. And we're still working on getting D. Alford back in here, folks, now that the dust has settled and he is back in Atlanta. Because I know he's got some stuff he'd like to talk about with regards to his deployment and stuff like that. But, if they're going to continue to play a lot of zone, which is typically what that Dan Quinn Ulbrich style defense is, it's going to be a lot of cover 3, a lot of quarters, that sort of thing. That doesn't seem like the best fit for Alford and his skill set. So, going from Alford in zone to Bowman could be a bigger step up. And, maybe they move Alford back outside. I think he was a better outside corner in zone. But, again, it's like, I think they just need more size there. And by size, I don't mean height. I mean, like, you need some beef from your slot guy. And I think that was kind of the issue with Phillips in the slot, and kind of always has been, is like Phillips is going to play around 185, and that's about 15 pounds lighter than you would like your slot corner to be. And the same can be said for, Alford. Alford's up in the 190s, but, Bowman's thing is he's 5'10", but he's like 200 pounds. And that's a thick corner at 5'10", 200. Like, that's a big boy, and his physicality is obvious. Is he a little bit reckless at times, like you said? Yeah. But, like, you need your slot corner to be a little crazy. I mean, that is, like, normal. Yeah. So, you're going to have to whiff sometimes. If you're a bat out of hell type of player, you're going to whiff sometimes, and that's just how it goes. But it won't hurt Bowman as much in the slot as it did at safety, where sometimes he's coming down from a high alignment, as the last line of defense trying to knock somebody out and then whiffing, then it's like, oh, now that's a 40-yard play. If he misses a tackle at the line of scrimmage, hopefully there's a linebacker there, shortly after to be able to clean that up. But I do really like that idea of Bowman, and also just the emphasis on ball hawking, and we'll get into that also with, one of the UDFAs who I know is going to be one of your favorite people to talk about. They really seem to make that like a primary piece of their evaluation. Like Watts, most picks in college football, Bowman's right behind him, and then Cobee Bryant, the UDFA corner, also in that mix. Over the last 2 years, the Falcons have added, I think, like by far the most interceptions in college football of any team, probably the next 3 closest teams at this point. So it seems like they've really emphasized that they want to create turnovers, which for a defense that we think probably is going to continue to be at least somewhat shaky, hopefully just shaky and not like it's a house of cards collapsing every week. The turnovers can make a shaky defense look good some weeks because you take away possessions and things look a lot better for you.
Yeah, and I think people forget, like, that was one of the key metrics for that 2016 Super Bowl defense that ended up helping them out, is that they had a really good turnover margin, and they were very opportunistic, and they just had, the ability to create pressure, and they had one guy who was able to finish that year, and that was Vic Beasley. So, I'm with you. I really like Bowman's physical presence that I think that he's going to bring. And it's a very good point to also bring up the fact that he's not coming from 15 yards down the field. He's going to be closer to the line of scrimmage. And when you watch his film, he is playing closer to the ball. The tackling felt more secure. And the instincts they really, really show on film, because you're going to be asked to play the run from the nickel position. And at times last year, that's kind of what I really think ended up hurting Alford a lot, is he's getting beat up in the run, and then he's going to have to go through cover in a zone scheme that he's not super comfortable with, and it changes a lot for a player mentally. So really like what Bowman can bring to this football team.
Yeah, I agree. That's an exciting one, and I think all those picks together are interesting. Jack Nelson as a 7th rounder, not someone I had watched a bunch, but I know there's a lot of people that had him, pretty high in their late tackle rankings. I was kind of surprised that he went ahead of Logan Brown, but Logan Brown ended up being undrafted. So it seems like the NFL and the draft media were kind of way off on teams' perceptions of Brown. But, I kind of feel like Jack Nelson it's kind of a similar player to Brown. He's bigger. And it seems like they're definitely going for bigger tackles. I mean, you look at the guys they brought in, like Brandon Parker's 6'8". I think
Norton's up there too.
Yeah, Norton's big. Obviously, McGarry's big. It seems like they really want a big tackle out there. And again, that might be, you're sort of looking at, maybe this is more of an emphasis on the pass pro. They want those super long tackles that are just going to create this really difficult arc for guys to get around. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if we ever talked about Jack Nelson specifically on the draft show, but did you have any Jack Nelson takes you wanted to let the people get a hold of?
No, I think really, I've only watched his Alabama game so far, and so I usually like to try to find those programs that have some NFL talent sprinkled in and in the pipeline, and he looked like a day 3 developmental guy in that film. And so I'm interested to see what Ledford's going to do with him, and kind of see, if they're going to be able to maximize him. And, even if Jack Nelson, we look back and he's, a swing tackle, that's great. Getting a swing tackle on day 3. I have no issues with that. And, you need those players. We've seen Storm have to fill in for McGarry before. And so if you're telling me that hey, we drafted a guy that can, do some spot duty if you have a, injury for a couple of weeks, then I say, that's a good draft pick to get on round 6. So I'm not putting too many lofty expectations on him. I've probably got bigger expectations for some of the UDFAs we'll get into, but we'll try to keep those tempered as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good segue into those guys, because it is a legitimately really exciting group of UDFAs. I mean, it was kind of one of our biggest criticisms, I think, over the last couple of years, is especially last year. It's this is a team that didn't, that spent a lot in free agency and got a lot of veterans, but you look at what Raheem has done like historically, and this is a guy that has typically like really liked to lean on young players, or that was a big thing when Dan Quinn was here, is they brought in a ton of UDFAs every year. They wanted to see if they could unearth any of these young guys, and most of those guys ended up getting cut, but pretty much every year they'd find somebody that was going to stick on special teams at least, and they obviously had some big hits, like Brian Poole's a great example. So it seems like this year they kind of got back to that a little bit more, where they went a little bit harder and got in some guys, I think that I think three of them were definitely draftable, and I think one of them in particular was a guy that we both considered early day 3, I think, in terms of Cobee Bryant. So why don't we start off with Cobee Bryant? I think he's a guy that obviously seems like the most. I think Raheem called him like the most famous UDFA he's ever seen. His kids were asking about him and stuff, but you got a close look at Cobee Bryant like way before we even knew he was a thing for the Falcons, and I know you were very high on him, and we talked about drafting him in the mock draft like multiple times early on day 3. But much like in the real draft, it kind of never really worked out to get him because of the other needs on this team. So if you could get him as an undrafted free agent, it sounds great. Like, sign me up for that every time. But yeah, I know you're big on him, so let the people know what you really like about Cobee Bryant.
Yeah, so I think just kind of Cobee Bryant's attitude, like just the way that he approaches the game, the way that he approaches practice. You're never going to be worried about, is this guy going 100% out there? Is this guy competing? Because he's the definition of competition. He was jawing with everybody. I'm sure Nick Nash loves the fact that he's going to get to spend more practice sessions with him after their time together down there in Dallas. But I think it's really just kind of the mentality that Cobee Bryant brings as a cornerback. And he is aptly named because it is the Mamba mentality. He's going to, do whatever it takes to beat the man that's across from him. A very savvy guy, like mentally, I think like his feel for the game, his instincts are underrated. He's not a spectacular athlete. He doesn't test like out the water or anything crazy like that. But when you turn on the film, you see a cornerback that understands how to bait opposing quarterbacks, how to make receivers feel like they're left open. He does a really good job just kind of, playing, the game within the game, because he understands that he has to make up for some of those athletic shortcomings. And the biggest one that people are going to talk about is his weight. And so, he's listed at 180. I will say, like, yeah, he's probably like, every ounce of 180 pounds, maybe a little bit lower. I felt good about the makeup of his lower body. When you kind of look at how he is built, he is slim but not thin. He has muscle mass on his body, on his frame. Could he add more? Maybe. I'm not a nutrition scientist. I'm not able to tell you a guy's maxed out just by looking at him or anything like that. That's why the Falcons pay people millions of dollars and invest in that. So they'll figure it out. They obviously feel pretty good about it. They're bringing him in the building. But just to give you a good understanding, his base looks solid. So I think that there is something that they can build off of there. He didn't get pushed around or bullied a ton. Like, he does have obviously disadvantages with matchups. I'm sure, like Drake London is going to be great for him in camp, just kind of getting those opportunities against receivers built like that. The team will be able to have really good eyes and be able to get a really good point of reference for what is the level of physicality that Cobee can handle. Is this somebody that we can rely on? And, when we had initially talked about him, we were kind of thinking like, okay, maybe he could do some nickel and do some things like that. Since his addition, and then just kind of the chatter around him, based on the team, the focus appears to be on the outside. And I think I think that works. It's going to be, I think, better for him in the long run, because again, he's not going to be asked to do a lot of the run support that's required with nickel that we were talking about earlier. And so I think that he's going to be able to thrive on the outside, and especially in zone, because like we talked about it, when you're playing in zone, the mental part of the game is a huge aspect of it, with not really revealing what your territory is until you have to, being able to, again, bait the quarterback and all those nuances that go into it. So I think Cobee is going to have a really good shot at pushing for an outside depth role in year one. And it's going to be, I think, a dogfight, just kind of from what we're hearing from Raheem. Raheem, like you said, he acknowledged, like, hey, 11% of starting NFL players were UDFAs. We're going to lean on these guys this year. We saw them comfortable with leaning on Natron Brooks when they had to a couple of times last year. And so I think that I think he has a DC who he trusts more to coach up guys and is more comfortable with these more raw or UDFA style talents. And maybe, with Lake and it being his first year as a DC ever at this level, he wanted to try to maybe just lean on vets more to help him out, to try and make his life a little bit easier. That plan did not work, like you said, and it's clear that it's been scrapped. I think there's a big youth movement that came through this off season, and I think that they're going to lean on a couple of these other guys that they brought in.
Yeah, I really like getting Cobee Bryant. Obviously, you love the price tag of nothing. That's great. Anytime you can get high upside players there, you love it. And like I don't really get him being undrafted. It seems like weirdly his personality rubbed some coaches the wrong way. That was kind of what I heard, was that the interviewing didn't go well for him. But like that's his personality seems like that's exactly what you want from your corners. Like you want a guy like that. But I mean, I think it's probably critical that Marquise Williams was at the Shrine Bowl, because that was probably a big deal in getting him to sign with Atlanta. Was Marquise was there, had the connection with him, was able to talk to him, and that I imagine was critical in getting him here. And it doesn't seem like he had a big issue with him either if he ends up here in Atlanta. I mean, I think it's very possible the Falcons would have drafted him if they had other day 3 picks to spend, but they kind of needed a developmental tackle. They didn't want to risk losing one of their favorite guys there. And corner is, somewhat crowded in terms of the actual depth chart, so I get why they didn't prioritize that. But yeah, I think him playing outside is great, because there's just not a ton of competition there. I mean, he basically has to beat out Mike Ford. Is probably what's going to have to happen for him to win that job. And like Mike Ford is just a special teamer. He's a good one, but you don't want him playing corner. So I wouldn't be shocked the Falcons are like, we'd rather just have Cobee Bryant, and we think, because they've got a couple special teams aces already, and Kadero Hodge, Ford would be nice to have, but it's like, you don't really feel like you have to have him at this point, and you could kind of keep him on the practice squad without too much concern. But his competition for playing time will be really tough, obviously outside, because of Mike Hughes and AJ Terrell are both going to be starting, and then you have to imagine Clark Phillips is probably in the mix as well on the outside in terms of the top depth guys. But I think there's a clear path for him to make the roster, but simply because, look, he's a high-profile UDFA. I think he's unlikely to survive the practice squad. So, I mean, that's going to help his chances of making the roster. If the teams worry about him getting picked off the practice squad, then they, you're kind of forced into keeping him, which is good for him too. So, I think it's a setup that will ultimately be good for him and will hopefully result in him being able to be kept on the roster. I think it would be disappointing if he didn't, given all the hype, if he didn't end up making it. But I think he's got a great shot, and I do think he does have starting ups, particularly in zone. Like, that's kind of the thing, is like I think you can mitigate a lot of his weaknesses in zone coverage, which is what the Falcons are going to be playing the majority of the time. And he doesn't have to start this year at 180, right? You can try to put another 5 to 10 pounds on there over the course of the season. So maybe, when he's getting an opportunity to compete for a starting job next year, he's a little bit closer to 190, and you're nowhere near as concerned about the weight at that point. But I do like that one a lot. I know the other player that's gotten a lot of hype has been Nick Nash, and I've been, driving that train. I know you got to see him at the Shrine Bowl as well, and I think Nash was the head turner at minicamp, which is not surprising given, it's probably always going to be the receivers that turn heads when you're getting, just throws against air. But so I'm just going to go ahead and take the W on Nick Nash after one rookie minicamp. Yeah, I mean, I know you saw him at the Shrine Bowl as well. So what did you think about Nick Nash coming in?
Yeah, so Nick Nash is really interesting. I think this is going to be another guy where like Cobee, his mental understanding of the game is going to probably be at a better level than you would expect for UDFA. So, former quarterback who converted to wide receiver. So that's kind of, when we talk about his depth of understanding, he knows the ins and outs of like what he is supposed to be doing as a receiver, and then the why from the perspective of whoever is throwing him the football. And that's a really, like, when you look at the Julian Edelmans and you look at these other guys that have had success, that's a part of the game that they talk about that gave them a mental edge over the opponents and over the other receivers that they were competing with, because it's just a perspective that not a lot of guys get. And he had it at a pretty high level playing QB all the way through into college. So I like Nash a lot as a prospect. He seems like, they looked at Casey Washington, and they kind of were like, we really need to get some competition in here because Casey wasn't able to be healthy for us last year. And, we have an opportunity to get better in this room still, even though, we like what we have. And I think Nash is probably, one of the better options, especially for the price that they could have picked up to compete. There's a lot of similarities between him and Washington. Not a blazer by any means, but he has a very good understanding of the short and intermediate game. I think that you're still seeing him refine his route running. It's something that he's going to continue to, I think, get better at and improve on. How much will he be able to improve? Only time will tell, but he's still learning the position and all of the nuances that come with it. He has the size that you need for your wide receiver 3 if he's going to be a part of your run game, if you are going to be in 11 personnel a lot again. We saw at times how much they struggled with Ray or with Darnell Mooney, and kind of asking them to do a little bit more of the dirty work. And, they did their best, but it's not why you have, either of those guys. So you kind of needed to look for a solution and say, hey, is it going to be Hodge? Are we going to bring him and use him as a receiver more? He's got that new number. He's got that new deal. Maybe he's feeling good. Maybe Casey Washington rises above and he shuts the door on all this Nick Nash hype. And he's going to have a healthy year and he's going to be that guy. But, regardless, I think Nash is legitimate competition to kind of fight for that, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 spot. And the Falcons don't rotate their guys a ton, but they do call on them when needed. We saw Hodge score a game winner when London had to go out because he got the air knocked out of him, and we've seen other guys be called upon in random scenarios. So a older kid who has the understanding of the game at the depth that he does, and I think it's a solid UDFA grab. And again, I think having Marquise down there at the Shrine Bowl paid dividends for the team, and they're really leaning on him and his evaluations. And I imagine that he is thinking about who can help my special teams unit too while we're here. Who are guys that I am noticing in practice that are doing all the little things, that are taking those drills as seriously as they're taking the positional drills, because they go through teams and all those things in practice there. And so I anticipate that a couple of the guys we grabbed stood out to him in those regards.
Yeah, I think it seems like there's like a clear, you look at sort of as a whole now that we've seen the draft and everybody that's been brought in, and it's like they just want size. Like, it's clear, like the only guys that were brought in that weren't big receivers, like big body guys, were Jamal Agnew, who's a return specialist, and Philip Dorsett, who was just cut. So like, I mean, clearly, like Ray McLeod, I think they were kind of like, we think he's a good receiver, like last year. Like, we think he's a good receiver. Let's see if we can get something here. And he ended up, I think, being better than expected and sort of just filling that role for them. But it seems like that's not necessarily the archetype they want in the slot long term, or as their wide receiver 3. Like, they like Ray, and I would imagine he's still the wide receiver 3 this year. But this is the last year of his deal, and we'll see what the plan is there. But other than that, I mean, it's like every single guy in this room is like 6'1 plus. Like, Nick Nash is like 6'2, 6'3. I think David Sills is 6'3. Jesse Matthews was 6'1. Kai Polk 6'3. Casey Washington 6'2. Dylan Drummond 6'2. Quincy Skinner 6'2. Chris Blair 6'2. Like, they're all big bodied receivers, and it's like, this is clearly, we're going more for the Rams. Like, we want a bunch of similar like profile receivers that we can just mix up and put anywhere on the field. And that, like you said, probably going to help the run blocking to have that size out there as well. And Nick Nash, I think, is just the latest the latest example of this, and probably the highest profile of all these guys they've brought in. But I mean, I think that it's pretty obvious now that the team wants to get bigger in the slot, and not just, because they like that, but I think they like moving Drake London in there, and that's kind of the one knock on Ray is you can't really put him outside. So if you want to do motion and swap, your slot and your outside guy, Ray's not really allowing you to do that at this point. So long term, seems like the move is that they want to have a bigger slot presence. And Nick Nash, I think, definitely was better in the slot. He played outside, I think his first year as a receiver, and was still good. But in the slot, his biggest issue on film that I saw was he just really can't get off press. He just doesn't. Yeah. That's the one. I was actually shocked at how good a lot of his routes looked and his footwork for someone who's only played receiver for a couple of years. But he can't beat press. He can't get off. He can't get the hands off him. So just put him in the slot, and I mean, oh look, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns, crazy. So I think that's definitely his best path early on. But given how quickly he's picked up the rest of the position, I wouldn't be shocked if, in a few years he's able to beat press as well. But super high potential guy. I mean, you don't just luck into 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns. There's definitely something there with Nash. The athletic ceiling isn't really there, but for a wide receiver 3, you don't need that. You just need someone who's going to be good. Can they run the routes? Can they get where they're supposed to be? Can they help you out as a run blocker? Can they catch touchdowns? Because outside of Drake, that's kind of their what they were lacking, I think, in the receiving core, because Pitts wasn't really filling that role the way you wanted. Maybe that'll get better, but it's outside of London, where's our size that we need in the red zone? And it seems like a concerted effort was made to fix that. And hopefully between all of these guys that we mentioned, whether it's Nick Nash or one of these other guys, they're able to get that fixed for 2025.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think that it'll be interesting to kind of see how it progresses. Like we said, we know that they don't rotate whoever their top 3 are a ton, but we do know that they expect everybody to kind of be able to do the same thing. And they're building the room out that way.
Yeah. So that's exciting. It's an exciting group. Obviously, wide receiver 5 and 6 is, no matter what, the most exciting camp battle, just because, because we usually get to see more of the receivers in other positions. It's just kind of how camp goes, but that'll be an interesting one to follow. I know another guy that was not really on my radar at all because I assumed he was a guard or a tackle, but Josh Gray comes in, and it seems like he's basically going to be a center. And I know several people had him evaluated as a center, and I know you mentioned that he actually played center at the Senior Bowl or at the Shrine Bowl as well. So I'm really curious to hear thoughts on Josh Gray, because Newsel hasn't signed his tender yet, but he's going to be a lot of people were freaking out about that. It's not that big a deal. I mean, I don't really know why he hasn't signed it. It doesn't. Maybe he just wants to skip minicamp. I don't know, but that's not really a concern to me. But the spot behind Newsel is, I think, the most concerning thing, because right now it's Javon Gwynn, who we haven't really seen perform at any level that I would consider reliable. So it's okay, well, who else do we got? And maybe the answer is Josh Gray.
Yeah. So, for all that we've said about Cobee and Nash, I would probably say right now, if I had to guess who's maybe the best chance at making the 53, it would maybe be Gray, just based on the depth issues that you're talking about right now, because Gwynn's been a guard, listed as guard the whole time he's been here, and we even saw them pass up playing him last year in favor of Hinton. So I'm not really sure how serious they are about giving him a shot there, but I think that Gray has a really, really good opportunity in front of him, and this may be one of the best situations that he could have gone to as a player, and I think he recognized that. So he is somebody that has played both tackle and guard at the college level. He moved to guard in his senior season, and he's he doesn't have the length needed to play kind of on the edge at this level. He is 6'5", 6'4", but his arms are the sub 32, all that kind of stuff. And he's a little bit lighter. I think the Falcons list him at 299 after he was listed at 311 or something in school. So he's going to need to gain a little bit of play strength. And he's somebody who will probably benefit from like a year behind Newsel. Like Ryan takes year one, and then maybe Gray is what they have in the pipeline, similar to the Hennessy Dahlman handoff that we went through. Gray has like a solid anchor. Like he just kind of, I think, doesn't really blow you out of the water or like spectacular at any one thing, but he's a very sound, very smart football player. He has a good understanding of blocking angles, and he worked as a center the entire week at Shrine. He was snapping the ball. Didn't really see any snap issues in practice. They try to simulate that as best they can. It's obviously going to be different in the game, but there weren't any crazy errant snaps going over his head or anything like that. He did struggle a bit with CJ West and Jordan Phillips, but everybody there did. But I felt like that was kind of like a good baseline, seeing like, okay, how did he do against now what is like, I think both of those guys went on day two talent versus UDFA, evaluated talent. And it makes sense. He was playing position for the first time. He's trying to get an understanding of the feel kind of like even further inside. And it's different, but the potential, I think, is there. He's like, going to be one of the more intriguing watches throughout camp, and somebody that I think, at the end could surprise everybody if he's listed as the second center on the depth chart.
Yeah. It wouldn't shock me, just given that what we've seen from Javon Gwynn has been concerning, I guess, to say the least. And it seems like they are trying to kind of groom him to be the backup center, but like he hasn't really played it. And he's just like, this is the year of the tiny center, like the centers with short arms. Like this is just like everybody has the same problem. But like Gwynn is like even small for that. Like, I mean, that pick was always a little bit of a head scratcher to me, just because he's just so small that he's like a huge outlier. So, he'll have an opportunity, obviously. Like this is kind of probably the make or break sort of camp for him. Like prove that you're going to be our backup center, or you're probably going to have to go to the practice squad. And then, for Gray, it's an opportunity to become the backup center or stake out his claim to the practice squad, because I think there's also a good chance that they just bring in a veteran if none of these guys are, rely like what they want going into the season at a critical position. Can Elijah Wilkinson play center? I haven't asked him, but Elijah Wilkinson is the most underrated offensive lineman on the roster. But I don't know. I think we talked about this last year. There seems to be this obsession with Kyle Hinton, but it's like, what about Elijah Wilkinson? All this man does is like go out and play well when he gets a chance. So, I definitely interesting how they've structured the offensive line depth. It's like everywhere there's veterans backing up veterans, except for center, where there's like Newsel, who's only started 8 games, and then like 2 basically, late day 3 UDFA type guys. So kind of interesting, especially with a basically a rookie quarterback or close to it, that you're not really investing in much at center at all. I mean, it wasn't shocking that they didn't give Dahlman a giant contract, but it was kind of shocking that they didn't bring in anyone else. So they seem to have a lot of faith in Ryan Newsel and company to be able to hold that position down. So, I mean, I hope they're right.
Yeah, and I think Gray's size, and I think I think that they can get him. He slimmed down a little, I think, when he was playing tackle, when he kicked in size. I think if they can get his weight kind of back up, that they're intrigued with the idea of, again, he's not a lengthy center, but having kind of a 6'4", 300-pound plus guy. Whereas, I think Gwynn's like, barely over 6'1", much smaller, much like shorter in terms of length prospects. So I think that they are intrigued by that with Gray, and hoping that he can kind of add something different to the room, because kind of like you said, right now it's a lot of like similar problems or just similar type center within the room. Yeah,
I think so. And obviously hoping for the best there, that they could figure out a way to make it work and not be a liability, because I think the offensive line continuing to be one of those, better units in the NFL is probably critical to this offense, being that top 10 unit that everyone sort of hopes they are. So fingers crossed there. Yeah. Anyone else you wanted to touch on from this group or any of the other groups, in terms of the rookies? I know that a lot of people are fans of Josh Simon. I didn't watch him at
That's where I
all.
was going to
Yeah,
go.
but I didn't
Yeah.
watch many tight ends, but I'm glad someone else did.
Earlier,
So yeah,
when you said red zone target, or when you saying anything, that here's somebody that popped into my head, and Simon's really interesting. Kind of a baby Pitts. Very very similar build. He's a little bit shorter than Kyle, but he's like a legit 6'4". He's not very big. I like watched some of his film last year, and my draft tweet for him was, we're going to take Simon and we're going to lock him inside of a cookout for 3 months because he needs to put on a little bit of weight. And so, I think his path to making the roster, if Atlanta is going to stick to the utilization of their tight ends in similar fashion, so more inline, more traditional Y tight end, I think it's going to take him a year to kind of get the play strength that he'll need to be in there. But, maybe they like what he offers. As a red zone target, maybe they can see him working on the backside, and they can live with kind of whatever he does in those scenarios. He's a very intriguing guy. He looks like just like a QB's best friend in the red zone, and so I think that he's somebody else who's rightfully gotten a little bit of motion behind him, because I do think that he can be fun. The only thing that's really concerns me is that he's going to be in 47, which is not. He's not a 47. Maybe that's to influence him to gain the weight needed to be number 47, but
yep.
At this point he's more like 87.
Yeah, they're definitely making him the low man on the totem pole. No 80s for you, Josh Simon. You're gonna have to go out there and fight your way into like a good number, unfortunately. But they gave Felipe Franks 15 back. It's like as soon as they gave Felipe Franks 15
you haven't
back.
Heard, Kevin?
Yeah. About
he's
Frank.
not in 15 anymore.
Really? They took him off already?
He changed.
Oh, did he change to a more cursed number?
He's in 84.
Oh, he's at 84.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for everybody complaining about Walker in 11, this is the real slight to your wide receiver legend. Felipe Franks has no business being in Roddy White's digits. And like this switch that happened at the last minute, it all goes back to Emory Jones, who was wearing 11 last year. Emory Jones, I don't even know if he's real. I think he's in there just moving numbers around, seeing how he can upset Falcons fans the most. And he's like, oh, perfect. I just lost 11. I know exactly what we need to do here. Felipe, give me that 15. You should go rock that crisp 84 that Scordell Patterson and Roddy White were wearing before. That fits you, man. I can't believe they let this happen.
No, I feel like they're just like, this is like coming at us personally now. Like,
this one does feel personal. This one feels like
this time it's
attack.
personal. Yeah. The dalliance with Felipe Franks. It's like a different coaching staff now. Like, I thought it was Arthur Smith. It's like, man, Arthur Smith really loves Felipe Franks. No, like it's not just Arthur Smith. It's like the siren's call. I don't know if they think he's like a great Pitts backup or something. I don't know.
I know he wore 84 in Carolina, but when he came back over and he was in 15, I was like, oh, okay, crisis averted. But then the other day, just saw the old number tracking NFL account out there, which is just some real sicko aggregator account work.
Yep. Oh yeah.
He made the change to 84, and I couldn't believe it.
Yep. Well, technically, at least Felipe Franks got on the board with the reception in Carolina. He never got on the board in Atlanta.
Yeah, do you know who his one reception came against last year?
I tried to forget, but you're going to remind me.
Oh, man.
It was was it against D or was it no?
It was like a scramble play where they let
That's right.
Bryce Young look like Vic out there. It was awful. It was oh gosh, that final Jimmy Lake performance was something else.
I'll never forget that one that you posted where like you can't see the edge rusher like on the like end zone view. Like,
Where is he?
where is he? There's just nobody there. Like he's like covering the slot. It's like, oh my god. Like Jimmy Lake was like, if I'm going out doing what I love, and he's like, okay, yeah, yep. So that was really something. I'm glad we don't have to have that happen again. Hopefully. But yeah, anyone else you want to touch on? I think we covered most of the high profile guys.
Nobody else for me. I know that I believe Simon, is it Simon or Simeon Barrow?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah,
but Barrow Jr. out of Miami. Adam Old Damsky there on Twitter had kind of pointed him out to me as somebody who looks like they could be, intriguing. He's a kind of lighter guy, 6'1", like 280 something, but he's got some juice. He's got some speed. So he that's somebody who I'm going to keep an eye on. Usually pay attention to any of the linemen that Damsky singles out. So
yeah. I wonder if they like him as like a reserve guy for that sort of Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, like big end that they're going to be deploying this year. He's kind of that same mold. I mean, he doesn't have as good a size as Dorless or Harrison. Obviously, Harrison is kind of like, he's a freak in the best way. I mean, that dude is massive. And Dorless too is kind of uniquely big as well. But, Barrow's more of like, 6'1", like almost like a Grady Jarrett-esque sort of build there, but he's kind of that tweener weight similarly to Harrison and Dorless, that could possibly play that 5 tech for them and do some 4-eye inside outside stuff as needed. But yeah, I'm sure we'll have a whole show on how they're going to deploy this defensive line and, have at least an entire show dedicated to celebrating Zach Harrison playing edge again. I'm definitely going to have at least 15 minutes on that. I think if you add up all the clips of me saying how dumb it was that he was not playing edge, probably a 30-minute show at least. But yeah, I'm excited to see how these guys get deployed, because I feel like they not only did they like actually invest in getting a bunch of interesting defensive linemen and pass rushers, it's like they're actually gonna use them. It sounds like they're actually gonna use them and rotate guys and not just make Carter play 40% of the snaps and record like no stats. Yeah, that was shout out to Carter. Yeah, shout out. But Lorenzo Carter, man, one of the greats. He wore 0, and that there's a joke there. I'm just gonna leave it be. But you guys know what I'm gonna say, so we'll just leave that alone. But I think that's a great look at some of these UDFAs, and I think there's a good opportunity for several of those guys to not only make the roster, but contribute as rookies, whether that's on special teams or if they get an opportunity to play meaningful, like offensive, defensive snaps. I think it's an exciting group, definitely the best one they've had in a long time. So given that they didn't have a lot of picks, they needed to kind of find some ways to recoup value in UDFA, and I think they absolutely did. I agree. Arguably as good as any team in the NFL, so that's great stuff. But Tre'Shon, appreciate your time today. Getting in a Tuesday takes here before we devolve. After schedule release, it's like now we're fully basically into summer football. But guys, he's Tre'Shon Diaz at Trey3Sean on the Twitters. Also Tre'Shon Tre'Shon.io, or is it?
That's right.
Yeah. On Blue Sky. And I'm Kevin Knight, F Alcoholic Kevin. Of course, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Those really help us out too. If you guys got a few minutes to do that, thank you very much. If you want to support the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/FalcohawkLive, or with the YouTube channel memberships. Thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring today's episode. We will see you guys on Wednesday with Joe Patrick, as we're going to be getting his take on the first couple days of rookie minicamp. And of course, the show just happens to coincide with the schedule release. So any spicy schedule takes that we have, we'll break down some of that schedule release content for you on Wednesday. But thanks so much for joining us on Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, guys. We'll see you next time. Have a great day, folks.